You know, I feel like this whole narrative about Kogmaw being like really broken is like perpetuated by specifically like LS and his crew, and it's like it feels really tone deaf to talk about it. Like, isn't it obvious why it's not played? It's the same reason why Jinx isn't played, right? They're immobile hyper carries. Yes, Kog'Maw can be really strong in lane with Hail Blades, but he also suffers from a lot of problems against coordinated teams. For example, every time that you walk up to farm a wave, somebody can blow your flash, and then in the team fight that comes, let's just assume that there's like 4 big team fights in a game, right? The winning team forces four situations where, like, you guys already know the general vibe of a competitive game. Laning phase happens, whoever has pressure does drag, whoever is winning swaps for Herald, gets Herald.
Joe, they call it the church. That's the meme. They say that any of the pro players that are associated with the church, it's like a we're all just churchgoers. All right, hold on, wait. So there's already some issues with what he's saying, but I guess I'll play out the remainder of the clip.
Cracks open a turret, gets a decent gold lead, maybe 1 or 2k. You know, this is assuming that there's not like a huge snowball at like Blabber flashing in for crab or something, right? And then the next 3 dragons that come up, the losing team kind of has to eyeball and be like, are we gonna fight this one? Oh, maybe we just scale away for the next one. Oh, you know, maybe not, we'll just trade for gold. Okay, like, oh yeah, we will take this fight, you know, because we're an early game team, something like that. Okay, so let's just assume that like everyone kind of here knows the vibe of a normal like competitive game. You already know you can't give up soul most of the time unless it's like a really bad one. So
Cloud, yeah.
Playing Kog'Maw, same thing as playing Jinx in competitive. You're gonna get jumped a lot. Like, people are gonna try super hard to fuck with you, blow your sums, and then in a team fight where you don't have flash, or in a team, even if you do have flash, in a team fight where like you're playing an immobile AD carry, it can be really hard to do damage. It's hard to make a super play. It's hard to make an outplay when people are just fucking gunning for you with Rumble ulti, Silas, everything, man. Everything can kill you. Anyway, it doesn't really need to be said. Like, why is it not played? It's not a hard question to answer. You just have to think for a little bit. And then obviously there's upside to playing those champs too. The upside is that they pump massive damage to the closest target. People just don't think that it's worth it. It's not worth it to play. The upside does not outweigh the downside.
Okay, so this clip has a few things wrong with it. One is that it states that you can't walk up to a wave because you just get blown up. Now, obviously, if you're walking up to a wave where the enemy can just appear and blow you up, means that you shouldn't have just been walking. You should not have just been walking up to the wave, right? This is like deductive reasoning, okay? Any AD carry, you could have Kaisa, you could have Xayah, you could have Aphelios, whatever, right? If they walk up to a side lane, randomly, bottom right, top left to the side of the map, and the enemy has a Shadow Cane or a Zed, yeah, you're just gonna get blown up. You're just actually going to die. So it doesn't really matter what AD carry you are at that point in time. You're just gonna die. So first off, it puts forth a black and white idea of you can't walk up to the wave. Okay, now let's expand upon this a little bit, and let's say that you have your support champion with you. Let's say that you have your let's say that you have your support champion with you. Let's say that you have Lulu, right? Or let's say that you have Taric. Okay, there's actually very few champions that can chew through Kog'Maw. We're just gonna use the Kog'Maw example. There's very few champions that can actually chew through Kog'Maw before he'll chew through you, in a 2-on-2 or a 1-on-1 situation. There's actually very, very, very few champions that'll do that in isolation. Kog'Maw will literally he will spit through your ass and it will come out your mouth before you manage to kill him if he has like his enchanter with you, or with him. So that's totally fine. So that's another really weird one, okay? So basically what's happening here, okay, is when I say, or when Nemesis, or when these other people say that Kogmaw is really good, right? What's ultimately happening is there is a cycle or a series of mental images that race through our heads, okay? Now, now this isn't just with us, this is with you guys too, right? If you think, why is Zed broken? What immediately happens in your head is you get like lots of still shots that move very rapidly, and you see a Zed killing something, or you see yourself dying to Zed, or you see a teammate dying to Zed. The same thing goes for something like Kai'Sa, right? When someone says like, why is Kai'Sa good, or why is Kai'Sa broken, right? They see Kai'Sa gaining access to spots that she shouldn't be able to gain access to. They see her following up on things that she shouldn't be able to, and like all this other stuff, right? So it is a flurry of images that happen in the head, and then ultimately we as humans then try to articulate what is actually happening inside of our brain, right? And that is the way that we have a dialogue with one another, okay? So what is basically going on is we are trying to translate our interpretation of what we perceive to be realistic, or what we perceive to be possible, based on either a created situation inside of the head. Let me just mute sounds. So that's one of the things that's happening. One of the other things that obviously some people will do is people who have a hard time envisioning alternatives. Now this is whoa, that is very loud. Okay. I don't know. Okay. I will read that in a second, but stuff like that really tilts me. Like you see me like actually, you see me having like a pause and a really long talk, and then you feel compelled to go on Streamlabs and literally write me a novella. Like you just want me to pause. It's so weird. Anyways, so that's basically what's happening. Now, you'll realize that a lot of people in esports can't discern alternatives. Now, what I mean by alternatives is they can't speak until after something has happened. Okay, this is a really big problem when it comes to analysis, when it comes to coaching, when it comes to pretty much anything in general, right? Is that they can't see the alternatives that were possible. So ultimately what their entire speech ends up sounding like is things that have already happened. And it becomes very akin to commentary, and it's not actually analysis. It's just saying what happened, and then maybe they go a step further and they explain why it happened. But what they don't do is they don't pause and actually tell you whether or not it was good or not, or whether or not the opponent should have been able to react. Now, generally, when I'm doing stuff on stream, when I'm doing live viewings, co-streams, when I'm, anything like that, LCK, LCS, LEC, whatever, I try to angle it from the angle of autonomy. Which champion has autonomy in the situation? So, for instance, okay, an angle of autonomy is which champion has first option. So let's say that we have Cassiopeia versus Victor. Okay, Victor's abilities come out faster than Cassiopeia's, and they come out from a more reliable range. Okay, so no matter what happens in the Victor versus Cassiopeia dynamic, Victor's spellcasts and his abilities have basically first move. So in other games, I think in like Smash Melee, this is referred to as priority. When two moves will collide with each other, one is registered as being superior, right? So basically, when you're doing analysis, you should angle it from the angle of who has priority, in a sense, right? And then from there, you then try to deduce, okay, did this person mess up or did this person do it well? Now, I think to do that in the first place, you have to actually be aware of like what's supposed to happen. Yeah, frame advantage for fighting games. Right. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't know exactly how to word it. So it's called frame advantage. So this happens in games like this. Now, I understand this is like really long-winded, and this is a lot to unpack, but any conversation that is going to follow stuff like this has to be long-winded, because you have to lay out all the groundwork for like why this is the way that it is. Now, one of the things that you might realize is that original ideas, and what I mean by original ideas is things that will go against the grain, things that will go against the norm, are often pretty rare in a lot of fields nowadays, right? Because a lot of things are very understood. Now, in video games, original ideas are actually still pretty common because no one actually goes into doing the nitty gritty. Also, patches come along, the game constantly changes, and all this other stuff. But original ideas are very plentiful still inside of video games, but they're not as plentiful in other areas. So one of the things that I think is important to note here is that basically it's very hard for someone like me to have a conversation with another person who has a different set of images happening up here. You know what I mean? So if someone asks me to think about Kogmaw, I see a very different, cycle of images that I then try to explain than the other person, right? So if I see Kogmaw positioning well, doing things that he's supposed to be doing correctly, being accompanied by an enchanter, being picked in a right spot, and all these other things, I don't reach the conclusion that Kogmaw is bad because I'm evaluating it based on what the champion should be doing. Okay. If someone's cycle or flurry of images up here has Kogmaw dying because he's vulnerable or he's squishy or he has to walk up and all this other stuff, to me, I don't interpret that as like, oh yeah, Kog has these weaknesses. I interpret that as, well, you're fucking bad. Like, because obviously these things, I'm not denying that these things are possibilities. I'm not denying that these things can happen to the champion. But I'm seeing it as, okay, if these things are happening, there was probably a way to avoid it. Or if these things are happening, it means that you fucked up somewhere. Okay? So in the example of like Kogmaw walking up to the wave and just getting blown up or something like this, I mean, it's just totally fucking ridiculous because you can, if you go through like Chinese Kogmaw duo lanes, and I'm just saying Chinese Kogmaw duo lanes because Chinese Kogmaw duo lanes on Korea are very common. Generally, it'll be the Chinese players that duo with their Lulu, or they'll duo with their Kogmaw, or they'll duo with their Karma. And they'll climb the ladder, right? So, I'm just referencing the Chinese Kogmaw duos because that's probably the easiest place to find reliable Kogmaw replays from people that actually play Kogmaw. Okay, and what you'll notice is that what he's saying in this clip, I mean, not only should it's not even worth fucking engaging with, but the reality is that it's so black and white that it's ridiculous because if you go through enough Kogmaw games, you'll see a lot of instances where Kogmaw actually just eats the other person before they can eat Kogmaw, right? And in the situation where Kogmaw can actually just get blown up, when Kogmaw does get blown up, you'll realize that, oh, Kog just shouldn't have walked up, right? It's not actually a problem of it if Kog is good or not. It's Kog shouldn't have walked up, right? But then you put forth what AD carry could have walked up, and you'll end up reaching the conclusion that no AD carry could have walked up, except for maybe ones with kits who are hyper-designed to be able to answer an assassination attempt from that very specific angle. So then you're looking at a very small range of champions. Maybe Xayah could actually end up being one of them or something, right? But this is pretty ridiculous. Also, this isn't how analysis works. So that, I mean, we can get that out of the way. The other thing about Kogmaw is that, so he goes on to say that it's obvious why it's not being picked. Well, actually, I don't think that it's obvious why it's not being picked, because there's a lot to unpack with why Kogmaw is being picked. The same thing, I think, goes for Udyr. Udyr is not being picked because junglers want to play Udyr. Udyr is being picked because laners want Udyr. And it's the same exact reason that laners wanted Olaf. It's because Olaf allows the laners to basically play with their brains turned off. So when you have champions like this in the game that don't have inherent natural built-in safety, due to their own champion, and you need teamwork or cohesion in order to get them past some slips and bumps, then what ends up happening is you get a little bit more stressed. LCK caster Wolf calls champions heroes. True. True, yeah. That is true. He also calls Baron dragon sometimes. So that one's a treat as well. But anyways, going a step further, okay, so when he talks about Kogmaw in this clip, one of the immediate things that pops into my head, and people will only understand this if you played StarCraft 1, it's like Mutalist micro. So basically, his clip is... Now, interestingly enough, this was very prevalent in the West, okay? North American and European Zergs often would actually go for Lurkers, or they would go Hydra Lurker due to the simplicity of the build, because they didn't have the ability to micro Lurkers. Sorry, micro Mutalisks. They didn't have the skill level necessary to micro Mutalisks. So what would end up happening is they would default to Hydra Lurker, or they would default to Lurker centric builds. Or they would just try to not use Mutalisks, or they would try to use like the least amount of Mutalisks possible, right? But obviously in Korea, the players understood the upside of having the Mutalisks if you piloted it at a proficiency that would be necessary in order to gain access to the upside of having them, right? Now, this is akin to an AD carry player, that has the mind of a mid laner, which I know that's pretty hard. We're asking them for, them to double their fucking intellectual capacity. But if an AD carry had sort of like the mindset of a mid laner in order to gain access to the upside of the champion, then you'd probably have a very different point of view on the champ, right? So Kogmaw has enormous amounts of upside. Now, the other thing about Kogmaw is he requires sort of his own protection in a way, right? He requires things to sort of cater to him in a sense, not like exactly. Now, yeah, you can go along and you can pick Kai'Sa, and you can technically, right? I mean, maybe in his eyes, you can throw Kai'Sa into any comp. You can't throw Kai'Sa into any comp. But when Kai'Sa loses versus any comp, no one sits there and is like, Kai'Sa's the problem, right? However, when Kogmaw loses to a certain comp, because Kogmaw is a sculpt AD carry, and what I mean by that is that he's often sculpted into drafts. The draft generally tends to warp or morph around him. What ends up happening is Kogmaw will get blamed. Okay. Now, when Kogmaw pops off, he pops off. Okay? You basically can't approach him. The other really funny thing is if you ask, I would actually be really curious. If you ask mids, tops, junglers, what is the scariest AD carry to play against? When the game is totally even, but the AD carry is still scaling. I actually think the answer would probably be Kogmaw in a lot of cases, right? It's going to be Kogmaw, Jinx, and Twitch. I think it's going to be them. Senna's probably another one. The new belt arrived today. Oh, that's pretty sick. Is there going to be a photo of it? No, it's not Samira. Samira's an idiot. Samira, look, here's one of Samira's problems. Okay, here's one of Samira's problems. Literally, items reduce Samira is hurt more by supportive items than I think any other AD carry in the game. In the sense that like Samira with Grievous wins versus Samira is actually really big. Yeah. No, it's not Aphelios, because you can have plenty of champions that beat Aphelios. Kogmaw has an interesting thing in that he gains access to obscene amounts of range, and he also sort of has some range on his own that's going on there. So